And welcome back to the channel, everybody. So, if you're watching this, you probably have seen the first week of the podcast we're starting, but if not, this is going to be its own standalone video because uh, I didn't feel like this should be packaged into the podcast. I almost did, I had it in my notes, but I think this problem is a little more complex and would have taken up like the bulk of the show. So I talked about one Florida team that's, by the way, I'm Will from M&S, but we're just going to jump right into this. I talked about one Florida team that totally sucked it, but now it's time to talk about the one that sucked it up in a 0 and uh, in their own home stadium in week one. Florida State is a bad football team. That is the one team, genuinely, that I'm telling you to sell your stock on. Because that's not what they are. They are a group of talented players that have not coalesced as a team. And I'm sorry, like even if it's the ACC, it's still a Power Four. Which God, I hate that we're saying Power Four, but like it's still a Power Four schedule. You're not going to be able to just coalesce as a team as you go. It's just not going to happen. Um, and all right, so I talked about Dabo, his refusal to use the transfer portal, and it negatively affecting his program, right? Um, for the first, and I also talked about how I wondered if Miami's, emphasis on the transfer portal might not translate to success. It did. Florida State, who for the past couple of years has leveraged the transfer portal and done very well with it seems like the bubble's kind of popped. Uh, just to put it bluntly, pretty subpar high school recruiting, and the acquisitions through the portal just, like I said, they have not coalesced as a team, and some of them have straight up underperformed. Um, like a guy like DJ Uiagalelei, who like I think everyone and their mother was super high on coming out of high school, and I was high on him at Clemson. I felt like it wasn't his fault there, and then he goes to Oregon State, and I thought he was fine, like nothing special. Um, and then he gets to Florida State, and he's bad. He looks really bad right now. I don't think he'll continue to play this bad for the rest of the year, but I mean, who knows at this point? This team is completely unraveled, and they were unraveled before we even entered the month of September. That's really, really, really unfortunate. But what does this mean? Because, and I feel like this is going to be a very boring video and a boring take, because people don't want someone to come on here and give like the rational, like, hey, the answer is balance opinion. You want to hear me come on here and say leveraging the transfer portal is stupid, and this was always going to happen, and this is why you just got to recruit out of high school. The transfer portal is stupid, da 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 da. And then you have the people that are going to then follow up with that and say like, oh well, Florida State's an outlier, and you have to use the transfer portal, and high school recruiting is pointless, and da 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 da. One, I've never heard a single person say that, but I feel like that's almost what people expect, because I see the rational minds in the college football media space all saying the same thing, which is you have to integrate both. You have to prioritize high school recruiting and supplement through the portal. Everyone is saying that, but yet somehow it seems like the bulk of I don't know about the bulk, but just so many viewers are like interpreting people like Josh Pate saying that as like one or the other. Like the infamous one like this week was something. Oh wow, the thing that's failing at Florida State. That's the philosophy that you want Clemson to adopt. Who said that? He didn't. No one is saying that. Um, but and also it's not even just a philosophy thing. Mike Norvell knows it's important to recruit out of high school. They just haven't done it all that well. Like like it'd be one thing if it were Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss coming out in week one and stinking it up. That's a philosophy thing. That team is built almost entirely through the portal and almost like supplemented through high school recruiting because they're a window team and that's out of necessity. Florida State, they know they have to recruit out of high school. They just have not done it all that well. The same, like it reminds me of like Auburn. We're like, yeah, it was known forever under Gus, under Harson, and then now under Hugh. That it's like, oh yeah, gotta recruit better out of high school. Do we think that coaches are dumb? Do we think that they didn't like this is the game that they grew up in, right? You don't think they know that high school recruiting is important? Promise you they do. And I'm just gonna be honest. It's nobody's place to come in here and say like, "Oh, you're doing a bad job recruiting. You're doing a good job recruiting," because the college football calendar is so beyond messed up that I don't know how anybody does a good job of recruiting. And with all the constant rule changes and new things dropped in these coaches' laps and this, that, and the third, yeah, like I mean, the best of the best are still the best right now, and we've seen people figure it out. Hugh Freeze is a good example of a guy who's recruiting his tail off at Auburn, and because he's fortunate, the NIL structure is really good over there, so he can do what he wants. He can go get the players he needs. He can supplement for the transfer portal, and he can recruit out of high school. Florida State, it's not that they don't want to do it; they just haven't. And last year obviously they go undefeated and then they miss the CFP and then they get smacked by Georgia and everyone's kind of sitting there at that point. It's like, oh yeah, no, 2024 is going to be a revenge year. Well, no, because a lot of those players on that team are gone. The players that it was important to are gone. A lot of the people that played significant roles that would even guys out of the portal that like were there for the FSU cause, right? They're out of there. This is a culture overhaul that happened this year, and it's just not been good. The effort in a lot of areas is piss poor. In some ways, I feel bad for Mike Norvell because what do you do? Like again, I'm not going to say any names specifically on this one because one, any first off, all of these guys are significantly more talented than I could ever dream of being. But also, who's to say I'm wrong and maybe this isn't what's going on in their head, or who's to say they don't just improve throughout the year? Hell, there's still a world where FSU runs the table and they end up winning the ACC and making the CFP. It's not going to happen, but there's a world where it does. But what do you do as a head coach when you go out and you get a mercenary? You say, "Yep, like we're going to drop the NIL bag on you, and you're going to come in here and you're going to play this role, and you're gonna be this cog in the machine," and they just get there and don't. What do you do? Because again, with high school recruiting, okay, well the freshmen come in, you typically don't expect a freshman to play unless they're special, and so you have time to develop them. You have time to implement your culture. You have time to leave your handprint on them as a player and as a person. But it's really hard to do that with a guy who's already knocking on the door of the NFL, who did his development somewhere else, um, and is really only using you as a vehicle and a means for exposure. And look, there have been guys like Jared Verse is a great example of someone who that guy was probably an NFL prospect well before he got to Florida State, but playing at Florida State significantly boosted his stock, and he was able to showcase the type of player he was, and he developed right now. But again, you look at the situation like Jared Verse could have left college a year early. He didn't. He decided to stay. A guy like Jordan Travis, he decided to stay. Trey Benson's a good example of another player that transferred and like gave nothing but A+ effort his entire time at Florida State, right? Um, that's you just can't expect that. Like last year's team, people I don't think people realize this, but like last year's team was a little more similar to Michigan than people realize because they had a significant amount of players that were on the previous team or the previous couple teams that had seen the year over year development and were committed to that cause. Michigan was a little bit different because they were just on the doorstep of the national championship and they had all the seniors decided to come back because they knew they could win it. Uh, but it's almost like the window is a year late for Florida State. So it's like instead of having players that either aren't going anywhere or could go and decide not to, it was players that were like going to graduate regardless, or like couldn't pass up on going to the league at that juncture. Like, it's just not a good situation for Florida State. And I will say, I think any player that is there trying to boost their stock by just not committing to the team and the culture and just doing their own thing and trying to just go out there and play their game. Talent evaluators and NFL franchises, most of them know it when they see it. So I'm not saying, I don't think this will be a pervasive problem for Florida State. I don't think this will even be that big of an issue in college football. But we are being shown right now a prime example of a team thrown together largely through the transfer portal, not working due to culture. So I think this will actually, in a roundabout way, be good for college football because we have the two extremes in the same conference. The heavy transfer portal and the refusal to use it, they both look kind of bad in week one. And I'll go as far as to say this, Miami's actually the happy medium. Miami is the goal. Tons of talent from the transfer portal. Mario Cristobal is a psychotic high school recruiter. Like, you want to talk about the transfers, talk about like Francisco Malagoa. Like, this is a team that is very well structured with high school kids that developed under Mario and that staff there. So yeah, I just had to get on and talk about it because, like, again, like I can sit here and break down, talk about like, oh wow, DJU looked really bad in both games, and wow, he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, and this, that, and the third, and oh, like wow, just piss poor effort. Like I could go on and on and on, but at the end of the day, you guys know what you saw. Everyone knows what they're seeing. I just also like some frustrating like interpretations of what other people were saying, and I just want to make it very clear that everyone knows that you got to strive for balance. All the coaches do. Mike Norvell does. It just didn't come together properly this year like it had in years past. He's going to fix it. Mike Norvell is still a very good head coach. Florida State is still a pretty good program. Uh, they might just be a bad team this year. So that being said, thank you for watching. And if you haven't gone and watched the first week of the College Football Podcast, please go watch it. I didn't have Matt this week, but he will be on the show next week, and I think from here on out. But thank you so much for watching. I hope to bring, and again, I know this is low production. I know the audio is probably not good, but like I'm a full-time college student, and I want to at least be able to talk to my fellow like college football and NASCAR fans on the internet. So we will have some more like project type deals coming up eventually. But I mean, anyone who's working or in school right now, which is probably the vast majority of people watching this, you understand. So, uh, again, thanks for listening to me ramble for 15 minutes. You have a wonderful rest of your day.